Greenland in search of the largest land carnivore in the world, the polar bear.
We'll be looking inside these ice bears to find out how they can survive temperatures of -70 degrees and how they can fast for up to 8 months without food. We'll be investigating reports of strange deformities in polar bears and what that...
We'll be following the incredible story of how grizzly bears evolved to become kings of the ice. Join us as we go deep into the Arctic. I tell you what, it's really interesting. You see this in photographs all the time, but nothing prepares you for seeing it in the flesh, as it were. Have you ever seen polar bears from the air?
Yes, I have, but not very often. It's quite hard to see because they are so white.
We're crossing a gigantic frozen fjord on our way to a place where polar bears come in search of food. On the east coast of Greenland, hundreds of miles away from anywhere, lies a small isolated village called Scoresby Sund. For most of the year, it's locked in by sea ice. Right now, in February, the only way in is by air. We have little idea what to expect.
So you can see now where we're actually going. The main village, Scoresby Sund, is just down here on the edge of the water. What an incredibly remote place to live. Beautiful though, absolutely beautiful.
450 people live here. There are no roads, just skidoo and sledge tracks. And a single shop where we'll need to stock up with food. None of our team has been this far north before. Simon Watt hopes to follow in the footsteps of polar bears. And Joy Reidenberg, our comparative anatomist, has her dissection kit on standby. Take a look at the price of this. Couple of trees of broccoli, right? 10 quid. This stuff is a real delicacy. One leek, 3 quid. Very, very expensive stuff. I wouldn't want to be a vegetarian here. Joy, do you really think we need so much chocolate?
Yes.
We've loaded up with enough food to last us 2 weeks. We're heading an hour out of town to a peninsula called Cap Turbin, where polar bears come in from the sea ice. No one's lived in this abandoned hunting settlement for 5 years. This old hunter's cabin will be our home. Despite being in one of the remotest places on Earth, we are not alone. New neighbours are moving in. An international team of scientists is setting up a lab in the old school. They're concerned pollutants in the Arctic may be damaging polar bears' health. To prove it, they need blood and fresh tissue samples. And to get those, they need access to dead polar bears. On the furthest point on Cap Turbin is another cabin. Holed up inside is the region's best hunter, 64-year-old Christian Josephson. As a traditional subsistence hunter, he's allowed by law to hunt a small quota of polar bears. He sits patiently scanning the horizon. Hunting polar bears is controversial, but hopefully some scientific benefits can come from it. Christian needs bears for fur and meat for his family. The scientists need bears for their samples, and we need a bear for our anatomical dissection. But we'll only have access to one if the scientists can persuade the hunters to collaborate. For the first 2 days, there's no sign of bears. But on our third day, our camera chances upon something unexpected. A hunter is out with his dog team on the trail of a bear.
I can see it, I can see it. It's been hit.
Is it?
Yeah. They killed it. It's in the water there.
We race down onto the ice sheet, unsure of what to expect. Just heard on the radio that a polar bear's been shot right in the village, so I'm dashing back to see what's going on. By the time we arrive, several hunters have already begun skinning it. This guy shot the bear. He's so young. I just hope the scientists can win him over. Rune, it's Mark. Do you want to speak to the hunter? Because they're halfway through skinning at the moment.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, let's pass you on to the hunter. Do you want to speak to the scientists on the phone? Okay, Rune, you're on loudspeaker, Rune, so you can speak to the hunter now. I'll put the phone by his ear. Here you go.
I'm not speak English.
Okay. Danish?
No. He doesn't speak Danish.
Hang on, Rune, hold on. We need somebody who can speak, translate, try and speak to Rune. Okay, his name's Rune. He's the head of the Danish scientists. The scientists are trying to persuade them to bring the polar bear to their lab at Cap Turbin by offering a small reward.
여기 사시주디오 구시uk 더 마세쿠 다시 뭔가 신나왔어 더 지우세사죠 그 좋은 음악고 이리 신나가 지역들이
Tiedonko? Tää on vain pitää tiedonko?
They want to share it now.
They don't want the reward.
No,
They want to share it for themselves. Now. Okay. For this proud young hunter, this is not about money. I mean, it is incredible for me to be so close to a polar bear. We've only been out here 3 days looking for them, but you just constantly want to get close to one to see one. But equally, it's heartbreaking in a way to see it taken apart, and especially when we haven't been able to make the benefit of taking samples for science. But the hunters have made the decision. They don't want the reward from the Danish scientists. They want to cut it up now, which is what they're doing, and share it amongst themselves, which is the traditional way of what they do. Obviously the skin is very valuable to them, so they've taken that off first because very quickly it would get frozen. But this is actually quite a small bear, I gather, a male, but huge surface area on this foot when it's on the ice, to be able to walk through the snow and on the ice without going through. But what is interesting to me, I was expecting to find much bigger claws, but you can see, if I hold this up, you can see there's the claw there, which they're actually really pretty short and sharp. It's almost like having crampons on your feet, which is perfect for walking across the ice. Amazing. What will you do with this now? This meat?
Dry home.
Yeah, will you
And-
dry? You eat it? Yeah, cook
cooking
it straight
and
away, or do you leave it for a few weeks before cooking it, or you cook it straight away?
We cook maybe about half an hour.
Tonight?
Yes.
Big
yeah.
dinner.
Yes.
Right away.
It's taken, what, 30 minutes for these guys to completely dismember this carcass and split it up amongst all of them. They've put it all in bags now and they're all individually taking it off to their own dog sleds, and they're genuinely really excited about this. They now can only hunt around 30 polar bears. There's a quota and that's their limit. But this is only the second one this season, so, you know, you can forgive these guys for being that chuffed that they've got one, and they're taking all their body parts and the meat now back to the village to share it with their families. So it's sad for us, obviously, and for the scientists, because it's a polar bear that's died that we can make no use of scientifically, but there will be others. Global warming is not the only threat to the Arctic that worries scientists. Winds from other parts of the world concentrate pollutants here. To understand why polar bears are particularly vulnerable, we need to look beneath the ice.
When you look at the Arctic's barren, treeless landscape, you'd assume that this is a pretty desolate place. But believe it or not, underneath this ice is the basis of one of the most productive food chains on the planet. When you think about where Earth gets its oxygen, you picture the rainforest with its trees. Yet half of our oxygen comes straight out of the sea. It's produced by these. Tiny little organisms, invisible to the naked eye, little plants called phytoplankton. And they come in a dazzling range of shapes and sizes. They may be small, but in the height of the Arctic summer, when the sun shines for 24 hours a day, there are phytoplankton blooms which can be seen from space. For the phytoplankton, it is imperative that they stay near the surface of the water, within reach of the sun. If they sink into the depths of the ocean and darkness, they will die. To help them float, they produce a little droplet of oil. This acts a bit like a life jacket, keeping them up here. Unfortunately though, the pollutants in these waters are what scientists call lipid soluble. They love oil and they diffuse straight into the phytoplankton and the oil droplet. The pollutants in the oil are passed to other animals via the food chain. The phytoplankton are eaten by zooplankton, tiny little animals like krill. These are eaten by fish, which are eaten by seals, which in turn are eaten by polar bears. The pollutants accumulate further up the food chain you go at each level, and this puts the polar bears at the top at the most risk. And that's why the scientists are here to study them.
Given the problems the Danish scientists had yesterday trying to communicate with the hunters on the ice by conference call, what they've done is to organise a really critical meeting in the sports hall behind me tonight, so they can sort out how they can work together really well so that the scientists can get the samples they need. Rune Dietz and Christian Sonner, the two lead scientists, know it'll be hard to convince these seasoned hunters to help. First, they warn them what's at stake. They explain that because they're eating contaminated animals, their own health could be at risk.
Men generelt vil vi gerne ud og tage prøver fra alle de isbjørne, der bliver skudt. Ja, vi vil meget gerne have skind og knogler med al neri og dardua. Det kræver, at vi samarbejder.
The scientists are also offering another incentive.
Og at vi får hurtig adgang til prøverne. Og derfor er dusøren hævet.
Og vi håber, at vi kan komme op på at få...
Er det færdigt?
Ja, okay.
Ja, så. Ingela?
Ja.
Bueno.
Du.
Bye.
Bye.
See you soon. I want to
It seemed very friendly. It seemed very open to. How did it go?
Yeah, but my opinion is that they thought that the price was a bit too low.
They call us tomorrow, and then they tell us how much for fur, how much for the bones, and how much for the samples we take.
They have very few opportunities of an income, so when something like this happens, then they have to, sort of get as much out of it as possible. That's what they said. So.
If we're going to work with these hunters, we need to understand what drives them.
You soon get the sense that hunting is an art passed down through generations. Today, they've swapped their spears for guns, but they still use a sledge and dogs. For hunters like Scoresby Hamilton, maintaining the bear population is essential for his way of life. So you're only shooting males and mothers without no cubs? Females without cubs? And this is increasing the population?
Although it's more, many more polar bears.
Many more polar bears.
That's what I'm thinking.
Hunters say quotas have stemmed the decline in polar bear populations. Others say more bears have been forced onto the coast by global warming. Either way, the polar bear is still classified as a vulnerable species. It was a very different story when Scoresby Sund first attracted hunters.
When the early settlers first arrived here, they found loads of polar bears and seals, which was very fortunate because it provided them not only with food, but also essential clothing to stay warm. They turned up in 1925, just 70 of them, and it was really, really tough here. But they discovered they were essentially in an Arctic larder, loads and loads of animals to hunt, and in their first year they killed 1,000 seals and 115 bears. That's a lot of food and a lot of clothing. Warm?
Yeah, toasty. In fact, I'd say this is the warmest I've been for days.
And it is really, really cold in this museum, like no other museum you would have ever visited.
I think you can see your breath.
Just take me through the kit, what you've got here.
Well, it seems to be the hands, the gloves and the trousers, they're all polar bear and they're lined with sealskin, much shorter fur, I guess, so they can get overlap of their coats. The boots, though, mostly sealskin, turned inside out so the leather's facing outward, but down at the bottom there, my toes, they've got this wonderful, luxurious lining of polar bear fur. It's keeping me nice and warm.
It's not that I like stroking you, but this is wonderfully thick fur, isn't it?
Yeah, it's interesting to think that with all our modern technology, Mother Nature still does it better.
To survive the Arctic's extreme climate, evolution has provided polar bears with perhaps the most advanced. They can snuggle up comfortably in temperatures of -70 degrees, and unlike other bears. So what are the secrets of this wondrous coat? The hunters have lent us the fur from the bear killed 2 days ago to find out. When the skin's laid out like this, you get a real impression of how big this is. It is the biggest organ in a polar bear's body, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, and it's probably also one of the most important organs in the polar bear. Without this fur, the bear would die immediately.
Does it always have the same amount of fur all year long, or are there times when the fur is thicker because it's colder?
This is a perfect winter fur. I mean, during exactly this period, the fur is long and it's very woolen and couldn't be better insulating.
So you've got kind of two very clear layers of fur, haven't you? Down here, you've got the deep undercoat, which is very fluffy, but then on top of it are these longer guard hairs, which you see most obviously around the edges here, don't you? Whilst the guard hairs keep snow, wind and water out, the soft inner layer keeps body heat in. It's like a feather duvet. There's not much to it, but it's because the feathers trap air in the duvet is what acts as the insulator to keep you warm in bed. This thing is doing it through its fur. Christian, if we delve a bit deeper through the fur, the skin itself is a surprising colour, isn't it?
Yeah, it's in fact it's very much pigmented and very much black. I don't know if you can see it here.
So very black and
very
all
black.
and all over the bear.
All over the body.
I'm really surprised to see that it's actually got black skin. I mean, we know that a polar bear has the iconic black nose. You can see that here. There's black lips. There's even black around the eyes. But I never thought that that black skin continues all the way underneath all of this fur. That's a surprise.
Okay, let's have a look through the microscope. Okay. It's really cold when you haven't got gloves on. Oh!
It really is cold.
Okay, so let's just pass this over there. You can see it coming up on the screen. Well, it's almost like looking at a fishing line.
Yeah, the hairs themselves are actually hollow.
It's beautiful, really beautiful.
That's really amazing.
Surprisingly, polar bear hairs are actually colourless. But if the skin is black, why do these bears appear white?
Well, this is not that unusual. This water is clear, but the snow all around me is white. Somehow, as if by magic, clear things can appear white. Although water is clear, when it's frozen, the many surfaces within an ice crystal with a snowflake reflect all the light, making it appear white. The hollow fibres of a polar bear hair are behaving in a very similar way.
By looking white, the fur provides the...
It's just like having a black car in the summer. It traps the heat, and it's exactly the same in a polar bear. All this pigmented skin traps the heat, and it also helps the woolen hair to keep the insulation.
So what you end up with is a black animal with colourless fur, and it ends up looking white. Brilliant. The polar bear has one other mighty feature that protects it from the cold, being big, as Richard Dawkins explains.
One of the things that happens when you compare animals at different latitudes, as you go towards Arctic or Antarctic regions, you tend to get more massive body size. It's easier to conserve heat if you have a massive body. And you can see that if you compare these bears here. The polar bear has the largest body size in the coldest climate. But although body size gets bigger as you go towards cold climate, extremities, such as external ears, the bits you can actually see on the outside, external ears get smaller. Think of African elephants, which have huge ears which they use to radiate heat, compared to woolly mammoths living in Arctic conditions, which had very small ears. And polar bears have very small external ears compared to their relatives who live further south.
5 days into our trip, the Arctic continues to enthrall. But there's still no polar bear for the scientists or for us. There's still no sight of a polar bear, and now, frustratingly, the weather's turned properly Arctic. Overnight, this has blown up. We're now trapped in this blizzard. We can't go anywhere until it clears, but there'll be no polar bear hunting in this weather. You literally can't see 10 metres in front of you. For the next 3 days, we're holed up inside.
It's only having experienced the full force of the Arctic that you can appreciate just how challenging this environment is. Polar bears have lived here for over 150,000 years. To understand why they've made this ice world their home, we need to look back at their ancestors. Figuring out the evolutionary story of the polar bear has proved far from easy. There are very few polar bear fossils. The bears live on the ice and die on the ice. And when the ice melts, their bones sink to the bottom of the ocean. But recent DNA analysis has given us a tantalizing clue. If you go back 200,000 years, the world was in the grip of a great ice age. Most of the northern hemisphere, including Britain, was covered by giant sheets of ice. There were no polar bears back then, but brown bears had spread right across the globe. The largest brown bear in the world is the Alaskan grizzly bear. They're famous for gathering at rivers, snapping up salmon on their way upstream to lay their eggs. These bears are omnivores, eating anything from pine nuts and berries to moths and mussels. During the Ice Age, the advancing ice sheets forced the brown bears south. Evidence suggests that one population in Siberia became isolated, trapped by huge glaciers which cut them off from their food supplies. Surrounded by ice, these bears were forced to adapt or die. It is thought that some grizzly bears took to living off those that lived on the ice. Seals. At first they were scavengers, picking off any carcasses that washed ashore, but later they developed into skilled ambushed predators. A superb sense of smell helped these bears sniff out seal breathing holes from over 20 miles away. Then they lay in wait, hiding beneath their camouflaged coats until the seals popped up for air. So, the polar bear was born.
This is the skull of a polar bear. It's all that's left from the bear the young hunter shot last week. We want to see how the bear's head adapted to feed on seals.
So this polar bear skull is very typical of a carnivore. We've got these really long canines here. But what I really think is amazing is how streamlined the front of this head is. It's not like other bears, which have more of like a forehead bump here, and then a snout.
Because when you look at a grizzly, they've got a very kind of dished face, haven't they? You know,
yeah,
it's a big round face with the little muzzles poking out. This is much more a kind of Roman nose.
Yeah, in fact, it's so iconic when you see a polar bear. You see that curve, you know, right from the top of the head straight down to the black nose at the end, as if it's just one smooth line all the way. And notice how its whole head is long and narrow. It could stuff its whole head down a very narrow seal's breathing hole and pull out a seal.
Which, of course, a grizzly just couldn't do, because if it tried to ram its head down a breathing hole, it would simply get stuck. These are seal pluckers.
Now the blizzard's over, Scoresby's offered to take me out to sea in search of seals. Yesterday this whole area was covered by ice, but late last night a storm came crashing in and smashed it all up, so we got carried out on the tide this morning. This is just the ideal conditions for hunters like Scoresby. Whenever they like this, they can go out onto the ice, hopefully looking for maybe some seal popping up near the ice's edge, maybe narwhal. If there's seal out and about, there could be polar bears as well. This is just the kind of conditions you'd be hoping for. Polar bears have a really tricky time here. They've got a bit of a balancing act going. They need ice which is thin enough for the seals to come up and punch through, make themselves some air holes, but strong enough to withstand their weight so they can come, wait there, build an ambush and pounce when the time comes. The iceberg just over there. The So beautiful, but so dangerous as well. The captain has to be quite careful around it. The sheer scale of it, it's wonderful.
This is not so big. This is small.
We have to be very quiet now. We just saw a seal bobbing up above the water. It could be under this ice anywhere. But it does have to come up for air soon. Not sure if he got that one. Well, he was a good hunter if he did. As an animal lover, watching seals dodging bullets is quite upsetting for me. I'm still trying to come to terms with the fact that this is how Inuit hunters feed their families. They often hunt in small groups, helping each other out.
I got a bow.
Scoresby's on the radio to Christian, the old hunter from the cabin in Cap Tobin.
I know where they are. Just sit. I'm going.
Hi. It seems Christian's had more luck.
Okay, open up.
It's a walrus.
Hi. Oh, Christian. Good to see you again.
Apparently Christian spotted it on the ice floe from his cabin.
Did you hunt this? You? Me? Oh, we heard you're a big hunter.
It may not be the polar bear he was after, but it will provide plenty of meat for everyone.
Quite an ugly brute of a thing, but still marvellous.
This can be like this.
And are they dangerous to hunters?
Yeah, sometimes.
Yeah?
Yeah. Yeah, sometimes they can attack.
Well, you wouldn't want to get close to those.
No.
Now this is what the hunters and the polar bears are really looking for, the thick blubber layer of fat. We're talking about 2 inches, and this is only a small walrus. Now if you burn this, you get twice as much energy as you're getting for carbohydrates. In some cases, polar bears have even been known to leave the meat behind, only focusing on this fat. When you look at this, it's hard to believe that this is all fat. And the biggest of polar bears can eat 100 pounds of this in a single sitting. That's extraordinary. Although the Inuit eat this too, they only eat small quantities. The polar bears eat so much, it's a wonder they don't collapse from heart disease. Christian, do you eat any of this now?
No.
Nothing raw?
Not now. First cooking.
For cooking? Okay. What is that? Are you serious? Do you even eat this?
No.
No. Wow. That is a walrus penis, apparently. It's hard and has a bone in it. That's impressive, to say the least. Returning to Scoresby Sound after the walrus kill, the sea is starting to freeze over again. As we draw closer to the harbour, we can see a commotion around one of the other boats. No, but our German friends are. It's a polar bear. I can't pretend I'm not shocked at the sight of this young dead bear. For the hunters, it's simply another animal to eat. The good news for the scientists is that the hunters are offering this bear for their research.
This faster for you, Christian. Can you get your samples?
Yeah, of course we can. This is definitely high quality sampling now. She just died around 2 hours ago.
Okay.
If we are going to get some blood, we need to get going. Yeah. So we have to put it on the back and then cut it up in the middle.
It's stiffening up already.
Yeah, but it's okay.
I just went like this and it went caught right on the suit.
Get the light down in there, please.
So the local hunters are here working with the scientists to start taking the skin off, and then the next job's Christian has got to take a huge amount of blood to be able to fill all their containers to do all the various laboratory tests they need. And he needs to get on with that because now they've started opening this up, now it's going to chill down. When it's got its fur coat on, before it's open, it's well insulated and the inside's still pretty warm. But this blood is going to clot. Okay. By peeling off the polar bear's fur coat, the hunter exposes a layer of fat underneath, which immediately catches Joy's attention.
Look at how mushy it is. It's very mushy, very squidgy.
Joy, you can see now how much fat there is over the hind limbs here. If you actually stripped all that out by dissection, you'd have quite a weight in fat. When polar bears eat seal blubber, they convert it into their own fat stores, which they draw on to survive during lean times. Do you think the condition of this bear for a 2-year-old, the amount of fat there is normal for this time of year?
Well, of course it depends in how good shape the bear is. But I mean, at this time of its life, it needs to find the food itself. Of course, if it has been starving for a couple of months, I would expect the fat to be of a lower amount. So right. I think it's in a good shape. Yeah.
Okay. So your next priority is getting these blood samples out as quickly as possible. You're going to try and go deep in the chest and get the major blood vessels.
Yeah, the aorta and also from the caval vein. So yeah.
Now opening up into the chest, you can see the edges of the ribs there. The abdomen's open as well. You can see some of the small bowel, small intestine there. So they're getting in deep inside, and this will now give Christian a chance to get to the heart and the big blood vessels to get the samples that he needs. Right, so he's straight into the heart there, taking a sample out now.
Is it still warm?
It's very warm. Yeah, probably around 30 degrees, I think.
Christian's got the first 50 mils of blood out now, and they're filling up the containers. These now go into a kind of laboratory production line where all the scientists who want very specific tests run take their samples and get on with them. It's a real military exercise, this, but a very difficult environment in which to do it. The scientists know that the pollutants are contaminating polar bears through the food chain. When the bears eat seal fat, the chemicals are passed into the blood and transported to virtually every organ in the body. What effect do these pollutants have on the bears themselves, Christian?
Probably they have effect both on the immune system, the endocrine system, the reproductive system, the neurological system. They, for instance, it can reduce your immunity towards micropathogens and infections, syndromes and diseases. And it can lower the chance of polar bears of having cubs and the survival of the cubs. It seems that the gonads are shrinking. It seems that the penile bone is shrinking, and it seems that there is a specific lesions in the testes.
And I've heard and read stuff about the possibility of some polar bears even becoming hermaphrodite. Is that something you've seen, or?
We have found 2 here with an enlarged clitoris, and then there have been around 20 adult females at Svalbard with enlarged clitoris. One of these females at Svalbard had 2 cubs of the year, and both these had enlarged clitoris. It nearly looked like a penis.
It may well be this is something you need to look into further, because it could be a serious indicator of major problems in the reproductive breeding system. The scientists need to confirm that pollutants are causing these disturbing symptoms. The ramifications extend far beyond the Arctic.
This is the canary in the coal mine.
Absolutely.
They're a top predator, so they're going to concentrate anything that's out there. All those pollutants are being concentrated in the predator because it's eating everything else that's eating things lower in the food chain that are eating all those pollutants.
So polar bears are not just an indicator of the health of the Arctic ecosystem, they're a kind of indicator of the health of the whole planet.
Exactly. and it's been used in political work all over the world now. So this is not just a matter of what the Inuits eat or what we do of research. This is in fact being used by presidents and governments around the world.
It's incredible, isn't it, when you think everybody sees this as such a pristine environment.
And it is beautiful up here.
And it is stunning, but actually underneath the surface it's not as pristine as it looks. Over at the old school, the scientists are trying to get to grips with the scale of the problem. Blood and tissue samples collected from last night will be sent to their labs around the world. I'm keen to find out more about the toxic chemicals.
Looking just at this table, this computer is filled with, what do you call them?
Flame retardants. Probably by weight about 30% flame retardant.
Really?
I'm surprised to discover most plastics include chemical flame retardants. Almost all electronic devices contain them.
And we replenish our cell phones and computers every 2 or 3 years, and then where do those discarded products go? They get sent to various countries, or they're broken apart, and those components of the flame retardants or the metals get into the environment.
The more I learn about these pollutants, the more I realise what's at stake in the Arctic and beyond. The polar bear has adapted to living on the ice, but can it adapt to survive this man-made assault on its environment?
I'm heading into the mountains above Scoresby in search of one of the great wonders of the polar bear life cycle. Without this, polar bears would not survive their first year of life.
The babies are born nearly naked, with no subcutaneous fat and tiny. They only survive because their mothers dig dens, like this one, deep beneath the snow.
Using her sharp claws, she builds an underground lair.
It is really much warmer in here. The den traps all the body heat. The cubs can snuggle up next to Mum in here, and she can lie without moving, feeding or defecating even for 4 months or more. In that period she suffers from no osteoporosis or no muscle to emerge and face the cold for the first time.
This legendary body weight in just 4 months. We want to investigate how the polar bear copes with such a high-fat diet by carrying out a dissection of the digestive system. But first we need a bear. We only have 3 days before we head home.
We've just had a call, literally 2 minutes ago, to say another polar bear's coming in by boat. Do you know any more about it?
Yeah, it's a young hunter, I think, and I think it was shot quite recently. And now he's going to come in with the boat. And now we need to find some solid ice near shore, so we can pull the bear in and make sure we have some solid ice to dissect it at.
Do you know how big is it? Is it a young one, old one?
It's a young one.
It's another young one.
Okay. And now I gotta get down and watch out for the ice edge. Okay.
It's all got a bit frantic here at Captive Inn because we've had 2 calls now. We had a first call saying a youngish polar bear was coming in by boat, and you've just heard about another one.
Yeah, there's another. Olaf shot one, so.
We've just heard from the hunter it's a male, definitely, and it does look definitely bigger than the ones we've seen before. Currently it's under the boat, it's been tied to the bow here, so it's been dragged in from the front. It's a really surreal sight, I have to say, seeing a dead polar bear being dragged along almost like a buoy on the side of the hull.
Come on, Rune.
Come, we need to get more ropes so we are more people to drag.
Winch.
Okay, so there's a drum winch.
This one here, we know it's male. Any idea, you can see its teeth, how old it might be?
Yeah, I mean, there's no breakage on the canines, and then if you can look for scars around the face, could also be some kind of age estimate.
Right, okay.
Definitely below 10.
We'll have a look at that when we get it out. Obviously, another boat coming in now, but it hasn't got another one in there, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's another one in there. Having been waiting for the last week and wondering whether we would have any bears turn up from the hunters, it's surreal to have one in the water here, a big male, less than 10 years, and another one in here that's definitely smaller, but we really don't know much about it at all. The sight of this magnificent creature lashed to the side of a boat is truly unsettling. But now we're part of the scientific team, we must move fast to help them collect fresh samples. I'm hoping we'll get a chance to look at the digestive system to find out how these bears can digest so much fat. What they've done now is they've put this rope onto, there's a cable drum winch on the gantry there. Oh, and they're going to pull it around with the other boat. Okay, that's quite clever. Compared to the female we saw yesterday, this male is colossal. Keep going, it's a bit more, just a bit more. Can we go over?
Yeah, I have it.
Okay, 210.
There's a very clear rule about the way you handle a polar bear when it's dead, the collaboration between the hunter and the scientist. It's very much the hunter's job to cut the skin, because the skin is a really valuable part of this bear from the hunter's point of view, and they won't let anybody else do that. Look at the size of these front legs though. I mean, that's my hand against his hand. Absolutely huge. Of course, their front legs, hind legs as well, aren't just for walking on the ice and the snow. The front legs are also going to be used for killing and for swimming. Well, this animal is a fantastic swimmer. Fairly recently, a polar bear was known to have swum for 9 days, covered over 400 miles. This is a very accomplished animal in the water as well as on the ice and snow. This is like playing tug-of-war with the internal organs of a polar bear. I've got the trachea, the windpipe here, pulling out the heart, the lungs, the diaphragm, the liver, the digestive system. We'll get the whole lot out over here on the snow so that they can then take a closer look at it.
Okay.
The weight is 2.3 kilograms.
The media is freezing. I wasn't expecting that.
In front of us we've got all of the respiratory system. We've got the windpipe here, lungs, some of it's being cut out for samples, diaphragm, which is where Joy is, stomach is here.
Let's turn this around. This is
then
the backside.
All the intestines. What we're going to do is lay it out, because what we want to focus on is the digestive system. We've got some samples we need to take for the scientists, but also we want to have a look inside to see what this animal's been eating. Okay, there's your knife.
Okay.
It's getting quite dark now already, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, it's going to be a race against the sun.
This has to be the maddest field laboratory in the world. Certainly the most northerly, I think.
Okay. Now what we're cutting is the mesentery, which is a connective tissue that holds all of the intestines to the back wall. So it's like a big waving curtain, and it keeps it all in place and all coiled up, but in order to stretch out the intestines, we have to cut that curtain. So that's what we're doing right now.
What it also does, and you can see it beautifully here, is look at these blood vessels. When you hold it up to the light, just hold that, and you can see when they get nearer the intestine how they spread out, and when the food's digested inside the intestine, the nutrients are absorbed through the wall of the intestine, into this blood, and it's those vessels that are taking all the nutrients so that the animal can actually use them. This intricate web of blood vessels absorbs nearly all the fat the polar bear eats. Hardly any ends up in its feces. Don't squeeze out the shit out at the end, because we need a sample of that. Oh, it's making some very horrible gurgling noises. Oh, excuse you. Is that you or the polar bear?
I think it's all gas.
I've only got a little bag, Joy. You've got gallons there, haven't you?
It's all the gas.
Is it? Oh, okay. There we go. There you go. Isn't that nice?
There we go.
Technically, this would have been the polar bear's next poo. Now we're going to find out what this bear ate for its last meal. Oh, it's a huge stomach. Let's just have a look inside there. Let's open it up first. We are going to need to get a sample of that as well. Okay, that's a really not very pleasant smell at all. But let's just have a look in here. That's good. It's pretty difficult to see in here, though, isn't it? Has anybody got a light that we can get a better look at this? Thanks. Oh, that's much better. That's what it was. What happened then?
Oh,
nice.
Oh
wow! Now we
you
can see.
really
Oh, look at all the hair. You can see all the hair. That is fur and still with skin. So that's from
a seal.
A seal.
You can really see that hair. And if you look at the back side of it, you can see the fat. Mostly blubber. This is the tail of the seal. So you can get an idea of the size of the seal by just looking at that.
Okay.
So not a huge seal, but a little bit bigger than a pup. Because the pups, remember, have a white color to them, so they can blend into this environment. This is a dark animal, so it's not a pup, it's a little bit older. The only hard parts that we found, no bones, but the only hard parts we found was this claw. One little seal claw right there. And a little piece of the trachea right there.
Which fits, though, with the feeding strategy of polar bears, because they're so hungry for fat and blubber that they can eat. A polar bear this size will eat 50 kilos of blubber in one sitting, but they'll often leave the carcass, the rest of the carcass of the seal pup, on the ice, so they won't eat the bones and the muscle necessarily, because what they want is fat. The big thing is, how do they then digest the fat that ends up in their stomach? Because for us that would be a massive, massive problem.
Well, it certainly does in people, because people who eat lots and lots of fat also have high levels of cholesterol, and sometimes they can even form cholesterol gallstones in their gallbladder. But the bear is able to digest the fat really well, because if we look under their liver, underneath it here is a big sac. This is the gallbladder, and it's absolutely huge.
It's colossal, isn't it? It is colossal.
And it's filled with fluid. All of this fluid is the bile. So this is what it's using to break down all of that fat. Why don't we cut this open and get this into some samples of the bile? Both like that. So now what we're going to do is see if we can pour some out from here. Ready? You can see the fluid going in. There it is. That's bile. That greenish, orangey color.
And huge quantities of it in that gallbladder.
Yeah, well, it's such a big gallbladder. And this is acting kind of like soap.
Yeah, because if you get fat on your hands, very difficult to get it off with water. What you need is a soap. This dark orange fluid is the final piece of the jigsaw. It's the key to how polar bears conquered the Arctic. Fat is tough to digest because it congeals into large clumps that digestive enzymes can't penetrate. But bile is a natural detergent. It splits the clumps into small oil droplets, allowing the enzymes to break down more fat molecules. Bears produce a more concentrated form of bile than other animals, and that's why they can digest nearly all the fat they eat. You kind of have to just get your head around the fact that this stuff in the snow now here, this liquid is what allows a polar bear to be able to live in this environment where it needs to eat huge quantities of fat to be able to fuel its body and provide it with the heat it needs internally. Without this, it couldn't live here. In the land of the ice bear, it's always been survival of the fattest. But now this fatty diet is fueling an uncertain future. Looking back on this trip, I've come to realise that in this remote corner of the world, the scientists may be revealing something truly important. We in the industrialised world are unwittingly creating a toxic planet. As Joy said, the polar bear's the canary in the mine. Only by carrying out more science...
Sit here and think, you're in an old schoolhouse in the Arctic. How can you possibly make a difference to this? You know, if you're producing 1 billion phones every year, millions of computers using these chemicals...
Well, if we don't do what we're doing, we won't know. Right, what do? We just keep producing and inventing new substances and allowing them to leach into the environment.
If we know what the bad chemicals are, the ones that are affecting health, then we can try to, the engineers can try to make a new chemical that won't cause that effect in the future.
And this is actually the aim of the game, to go all the way from the chemicals we have that we suspect to have an effect, to identify the effect, to prove the causal relationship between chemical and impact on population, and then the politicians facing these evidences obviously have to do something about it. Otherwise, there's going to be a riot.
We're heading home at the end of an extraordinary expedition. It's been an unusual collaboration between scientists and a traditional hunting community. But what's discovered here in one of the remotest parts of Greenland will not only help polar bears and the local people, it could also be of global importance.